A lot of people these days seem to really love Class D amplifiers like a GanFet module with a tube preamplifier. And I agree. I personally gotten great results doing that myself. But not everyone wants to have tubes. I've talked to a lot of people that just don't want tubes. Well, what if I told you I have just the thing? Sounds too good to be true? Well, introducing the Java Hi-Fi Carbon Integrated Amplifier. This is the integrated amplifier that I believe everyone has been waiting for. Earlier this year, when I was in Montreal, a company approached me asking me if I would like to review their new integrated amplifier that's been apparently making waves out of New Zealand. I asked what was special about their integrated amplifier, and the word gallium nitride transistor was brought up. I was intrigued, but how many GanFet amplifier designs do I want to review, really? It's a module-based amplifier, and after all, I already have one as a reference from AGD, my trusty Audien monoblocks that I use and treasure daily. So I wanted to dig a little bit further to see if this was worth reviewing. While talking with Martin, the founder of the company, over Zoom, he told me that the GanFet module was specifically designed for their brand and that there was nothing else like it in the market. However, I still wasn't fully convinced. Sure, the integrated amplifier looked amazing and GanFet modules have been incredible performers, as demonstrated by once again my AGD audience, but also the price-conscious Orchard Audio products. But I wasn't too keen about going down the path of reviewing a bunch of GanFet amplifiers packaged differently in fancier and fancier casings. Because like I said, these are module-based amplifiers. So you put a GanFet module in a different casing and there you go. You have a different amplifier. But for me, I needed to dig a little bit more than that. So I wanted to ask him how and what is exactly different about their GanFet module, specifically designed in what way exactly.
We're not using an off-the-shelf OEM module. We have designed it specifically to work in the context of the overall circuit design.
So if you don't mind me asking, what is the module specifically designed for?
Yeah, sure. The key parameter for us was to optimize the performance between the passive preamp stage, which uses LDRs, and the signal that then gets handed over from that to the GanFet amplifier modules, and just getting those two things working in sync, working in harmony to optimize that performance was the key performance parameter that we focused on.
Now, if you didn't get the main message there, it was to match with our LDR preamp. LDR, or light dependent resistor, is a unique type of resistor, and much like the name, changes its resistance value proportional to the brightness of the light it's exposed to. Simply put, you turn the volume up and the current to the LEDs inside increases, making them brighter, thus decreasing the resistance. This means optical isolation because we are not dealing with electrons here, but photons. No wires. LDR perhaps provides one of the most unique and short signal paths that would impress even the purists of the purists. Awesome. So if LDR is so great, why isn't everyone using them? Well, that's because, as with anything, there's no free lunch. Light-dependent resistors are notoriously hard to use for volume control because they are inherently non-linear devices, which means the fine linear adjustment of the volume when you turn up and down is hard to control with a device like this. But Java Hi-Fi was able to overcome this obstacle through painstaking innovation and research that led them to calibrated microcontrollers. And I can attest, the volume control is very, very linear. When I crank up the volume, it seems to increase in volume in a very linear fashion. In fact, more linear than other preamplifiers I have tried. If you didn't tell me that this was LDR and potentially had all those problems that needed to be solved, I really wouldn't know. It's pretty darn linear. Another pitfall of a LDR is its higher distortion characteristics, much like tube preamplifiers. Another problem that Java Hi-Fi has painstakingly worked on to solve, and successfully contained it below audible levels with stated specifications of 0.03% total harmonic distortion and even lower at 0.01% below 20 watts. However, instead of going for the most impressive number on paper, Martin explained to me that they have carefully tuned their preamp's distortion characteristics to resemble much of what they loved about tube preamplifiers with GanFet modules. Now, if you're a measurement-oriented person, I have no way of validating or denying these specifications, as I don't have the necessary tools for these measurements. However, even if these specifications do check out, it wouldn't matter to you anyway, as there are far better measuring products out there for far less money, like the Benchmark AHB2 for example, that I already reviewed. But for me, measurement isn't everything. While I appreciate the accuracy and incredible measurements that assured me of the Benchmark AHB2's performance, I personally didn't find it musically engaging, so I quickly sold it to someone who did. As for the Hi-Fi Java, I'll go into my subjective impressions very soon here, but I very much preferred it musically, enough to compare it to my reference separates, and even currently considering it as one of my reference pieces myself. But the main takeaway from this part of the video is that, well, everything was made to work in harmony. Everything was designed with a purpose. The GanFet modules was specifically designed to match with the LDR preamplifier, and the power supply was specifically designed to match to the GanFet modules, which is awesome. But for the asking price, I hoped there was a little bit more, and thankfully, there was. These are ETI connectors. These RCA plugs are pure silver ETI connectors, and they cost about $170 for the pair. We have 4 pairs here. That rounds up to about $680 US for just the RCA connectors. And we also have the binding post from ETI, which is equally as ridiculously expensive. These are about 75 euros each, so for 4 of them, it's about $300 US for the speaker binding post. That's $1,000 just for the main connectors. And it comes with these isoacoustic Gaia feeds, which is, if you didn't know, the aftermarket upgrade isolation feed that I use on all my units. The insanity doesn't stop there though. The very cool looking casing here features an 8mm aluminum front panel and a 9mm real carbon fiber outer case. None of these are cheap materials, and one might even call it extreme or unnecessary. But this is their all-out flagship version that attempts to squeeze every bit of performance and luxury packed into one box. And it certainly matches in price with the extreme extras that's offered here. Only bested by the more extreme double shot version that essentially offers double the power through truly balanced topology and strictly XLR inputs and output options. Thankfully, for those that don't want all the fancy extras, they do offer the exact same internals for $9,000. They also do offer the LDR preamp and the GanFet amplifiers separately, and as Martin pointed out, the integrated amplifiers are simply these separates in one box, plus a few extra functions like DAC and Phono stage. And actually, the DAC in this is pretty darn good. I was pleasantly surprised. It uses Burr Brown DAC chips, and of course, it depends on the implementation of the DAC chip itself, but overall, in general, when I hear Burr Brown chip-based DACs, I find it more easier to listen to, softer sounding, for the lack of better words, organic, and that all comes across to me as more musical opposed to Sabre or AKM-based DACs in general. Again, it depends on the implementation of the DAC chip itself, but in general, I think what's important here is that the DAC in this augments the overall sound signature of the integrated amplifier very well, and altogether as a whole creates, again, this easier to listen to, softer, organic sound that to me is very musical, and I have no problem listening to it for the longest time possible. I mean, I wish I can just keep listening to this without time limit. It's just amazing. But what actually impressed me even more was the Phono stage. The Phono stage, actually, I wasn't going to test out because it only does moving magnet, and I actually have a moving coil cartridge on my turntable right now, so I wasn't going to test it out. But Martin from Java Hi-Fi was really proud of the Phono stage. He was like, you should try it out if you have a chance, because this is not just a throw-in Phono stage, it's actually very, very good. And so I did. I brought out my MoFi turntable that has a moving magnet cartridge, and it sounded really good, really quiet. Again, I keep saying this, but that's the best description. Organic, musical sound, right? No, it's not as technically great as my Alnic Phono stage, right? It's just technically big gap, right? Just performance-wise, big gap. But overall, I mean, for an Phono stage that's inside an integrated amplifier, I think this one is the best one I have heard yet in terms of Phono stage that's built into an integrated amplifier or a receiver. So very impressed with the Phono stage, big thumbs up there. It also has Bluetooth, and that was just okay. I mean, for me, it didn't really do it for me. I still preferred streaming or using the DAC or the Phono stage itself. The Bluetooth was just okay. I would use it in a pinch, but it's not something that I would use actively. Now, I've put this integrated amplifier through its paces. I've tried multiple different speakers with it, but mainly I tried the Crescendo Mark II speakers, which were absolute bass monsters, and the Totem Bison Twin Towers that I just reviewed and released a review, so go check that out. I'll link it in the description below. Really good match synergistically with this. And I also tried it with the speakers behind me. These are the Joseph Crowley loudspeakers I'm reviewing currently. And I've tried it with other speakers as well, like the Picard S400 Mark II and so on and etc. But everything that seems to be in common is that you still get that GanFet bass control that you got it with the Orchard Audio, you got it with the AGD units, you get that robust bass control, extension, texture, dynamics. I mean, bass is really not a concern. I think bass is something that Class D amplifiers are really inherently good at in the first place, and GanFets just take it to a different level. So I think bass is really taken care of for GanFet designs in general. I think the main differences with this one versus other GanFet designs is the preamp section, the LDR, and what that brings to the table. And that's mostly in the mid-range and high frequency in my opinion. And it gives that a little bit more softer edge, a little bit more soundstage, both depth and width. And again, like it's like having a tube preamplifier with a GanFet amplifier. And actually, one of my reference setup is using the AGD Audience with my Mentor tube preamplifier from A&K. And that gives me a wide, deep, really holographic soundstage and imagery. And it's just so musical to me. But again, with that softer edge, a little bit more refinement in the high frequency and so on. I feel that this is not as soft in the edges, a little bit more edge, but still very, very easy to listen to. And the soundstage isn't as wide or deep or as holographic of an imagery as a real tube preamplifier like the Mentors. But I find that this gives majority of that, and it's a good balance between like a full-on tube preamplifier and a solid state amplifier. So it's like more of a in-between thing, if you know what I mean. So to visualize what I'm talking about, I'll put it like this. So the Orchard Audio Star Crimson amplifier, if you remember, I said that the upper mid-range was a little bit edged out, and that's not personally my preference, but I find that the upper mid-range was slightly more edgy versus the AGD, for example. And so with the Orchard Audio, I find it to be more like a triangle. Think more of like a guitar string pluck or strum or a cymbal, right? It doesn't have much of a decay. It's like right there. So it's very focused, exact, and almost, you might even say accurate, right? So the attack and decay is very quick in the high frequency and the upper mid-range. And sometimes that can be a little bit more edged out, and higher volumes, it's a little bit piercing to my ears. But with the AGD and the tube preamplifier combination, that is rounded out. And the decay time is slightly longer. So that gives me a little bit more kind of musical experience while being a little bit softer. It's not like a smear, there's no smearing. Everything is very, very pinpoint on all of these. But I find that the edges and the decay is slightly slower and kind of dragged on slightly. It's not like it's much of a difference, but just enough to give me that little bit more musical kind of emotion kind of feeling. And then with this, it's like in between that. And pretty much the same thing with soundstage. It's in between like a full-on solid state preamplifier plus GanFet and a full-on tube preamplifier plus GanFet. So it doesn't have as wide or deep of a soundstage as a true tube preamplifier with GanFet, but it does have more width and soundstage than a solid state preamplifier with GanFet from my general experience. But that got me thinking, why not just get a more inexpensive Orchard Audio GanFet amplifier and a really nice tube preamplifier like the Mentor, and then marry them together. And that should be actually better than this, right? Technically. But not exactly. And don't get me wrong, I think that's a very good way to go about it. If you're on a budget, get an Orchard Audio GanFet amplifier and then a really good tube preamplifier like the Mentor. I think that will get pretty close to this. But if you actually think about it, that makes this actually pretty good value, because remember, you still get the Phono stage and DAC, and I still think the non-carbon versions have really good aesthetics and, you know, finish options. And lastly, I'll say this. Maybe it's because of all the upgrades done to this is messing with my head, but when I compare this to my AGD plus the Mentor setup, which is about the same price as this integrated amplifier, I find that this one has the sense of purity in the mid-range, even though it's softer. It's less soft than, again, the AGD and the Mentor pairing. Maybe it's because of that, but I find it a little bit more pure sounding in the mid-range, especially the upper mid-range. It's just done so right. The balance is perfect in my opinion. It's not bright nor rolled off, but it has this really nice and attack and decay that comes across to me as pure sounding. It's not, again, as holographic, so it's a trade-off here. But I find that this is not a replacement for a straight-up tube preamplifier plus GanFet, but it's a viable choice if you don't want to deal with tubes. I think this gets very close to that soundstage and holographicness with some advantages of its own. Now, before I finish off, one little complaint. So, not a huge deal, but when I turn off the amplifier and turn it back on, my input is not saved. It automatically goes to DAC. So I have to always change my input. Let's say I want Phono stage, then I have to go back to my Phono stage input every single time I turn on the unit, which is a little bit annoying. And I talked to Martin from Java Hi-Fi about this, and he thanked me. He was like, oh, that's awesome. We can actually correct that through firmware update. So hopefully that will get fixed soon. But again, it's not a huge deal since there's a remote that comes with it that you can easily change the inputs and you don't have to get up from your chair. So that's pretty much it for my experience with the Java Carbon Integrated Amplifier. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know that I did. And if you guys enjoyed this video, you find it entertaining, informative, any of those things, please click the like button on this video. It helps out my channel greatly and it doesn't cost you anything. And I hope to see you guys on my next journey. Make sure to subscribe for more and I'll see you guys on my next one. Until next time.